July 1518. The city of Strasbourg simmered under the summer heat. It was an ordinary morning in the Holy Roman Empire, merchants shouting over fresh produce, mothers scolding children, monks shuffling past with downcast eyes. Life trudged on as usual. And then, without warning, a woman stepped into the middle of the street and began to dance. Her name was Frau Trophea. She danced alone. No music, no smile, no rhythm, just erratic, twitching movements, arms flailing, legs pounding against the stone road. Her face twisted not in joy but in pain. Witnesses watched, confused at first, then concerned. This wasn't a woman celebrating. It was something else, something unnatural. Hours passed. She didn't stop. By nightfall, she was still dancing, gasping, crying, soaked in sweat, her feet bruised and raw. Her husband, desperate, begged her to rest. Neighbors tried to intervene, but it was as if something had sunk its claws into her and wouldn't let go. She collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise again and keep moving, as if compelled by some invisible force, as if fleeing something that no one else could see. For 6 days, she danced without rest. Then, others began to join her. A neighbor, a merchant's son, a baker's wife. Within a week, more than 30 people were writhing in the streets, trembling, convulsing, unable to stop. Onlookers stood in silence, paralyzed by the growing sense that something was deeply, terribly wrong. This was no performance, no ritual, no celebration. This was the beginning of a plague. Within 2 weeks, the number had risen to over 100. Men, women, even children. Spinning, stomping, jerking like marionettes with severed strings. Day and night, in the blistering sun and pouring rain, they danced, their feet split open, their bodies trembled, some collapsed and never got back up. No one understood what they were witnessing. The city was seized by dread. This was not a sickness anyone could name. It was spreading like madness, but it wasn't the mind alone that suffered. It ravaged the flesh. People writhed until their bones fractured. Some screamed for help as their legs moved against their will. Others wept silently as they danced beside the corpses of friends who had collapsed mid-step. What terrified the citizens most was not just the suffering. It was that these dancers were fully awake. They were conscious, trapped, aware of what was happening to them, yet helpless to stop it. Priests whispered of demons, physicians blamed overheated blood, astrologers pointed to the stars. None of it helped, and still they danced. Markets closed, streets emptied. A quiet panic settled over Strasbourg. The afflicted were no longer pitied, they were feared. People began to avoid even eye contact with those in the throes of the dance, afraid it might be contagious through sight alone. And maybe it was, because soon hundreds more would join them. The dance was no longer an isolated horror. It had become an epidemic. By late July, the streets of Strasbourg were a vision of hell. More than 400 souls now danced uncontrollably, many half-naked, caked in blood and filth, shrieking into the air as if trying to expel whatever force had taken them. Others moved silently, eyes vacant, tears running down their cheeks. Their feet were torn to the bone. Their muscles twitched and spasmed. Their ribs protruded like jagged bars of a cage that couldn't hold their suffering inside. And still, no one could stop. City leaders were desperate. Doctors had failed. No herbs, no leeches, no poultices worked. This wasn't a fever. This wasn't poison. And the more they studied the dancers, the more it looked like their affliction came not from the body, but from something deeper, the soul. Clergymen gathered in emergency councils. Some declared it a punishment from God, a divine wrath sent to scour the sinful. Others believed the devil himself had cursed the city. They spoke of Saint Vitus, a martyred saint once believed to punish the impure with uncontrollable dancing. They called it a curse of the saints, a penance forced through flesh. In a panic, officials made a decision so horrifying it defied all logic. They cleared out the Guildhall. They hired musicians. They built a stage, and they ordered the dancers to gather there, to dance themselves clean. The idea was simple: let the body exhaust the sickness, let it burn itself out. So they played violins and drums, they encouraged the dancers to keep moving, to give in. And Strasbourg became a grotesque carnival of agony, music playing over the sound of screams, bodies writhing in pain, collapsing, and being carried away. Some lasted minutes, others hours, a few days. The city had become a theatre of death, and the dance was far from over. August came, and with it, the deaths. Dozens, maybe hundreds died, collapsed from pure exhaustion, heart attacks, strokes, dehydration. Some split their skulls on the cobblestones as their legs gave out mid-spin. Others wasted away slowly, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but move. And still, they danced. Not because they wanted to, because they couldn't stop. The authorities, watching their city unravel, finally reversed course. They silenced the musicians, dismantled the stage, but it was too late. The dancing had moved beyond reason. It had become ritual. People were now convulsing in alleyways, flailing in churches, spinning until they dropped in the fields outside the city. It was as if the plague had detached from place and lodged itself in the human psyche, a parasite that fed not on blood, but on the will to resist. In a final act of desperation, the remaining dancers were rounded up, dragged by cart or carried, still twitching, and sent on pilgrimage to a distant shrine in the mountains. They were forced to walk barefoot over blistering roads. Some had to be tied upright because they kept collapsing. Others were dragged behind wagons, limbs still jerking in rhythm, as if some unseen puppeteer still pulled their strings. At the shrine of St. Vitus, priests performed a mass exorcism. They placed the dancers' bloodied shoes upon the altar and begged for deliverance. And one by one, the dancing stopped. Some recovered. Others never moved again. But the plague had run its course. The silence that followed was not relief. It was the kind of silence that comes only after great trauma, when a city stands on the edge of forgetting simply to survive. And yet, the horror would not be forgotten. The plague faded. No one knew why it began. No one knew why it stopped. And no one ever danced like that again. For centuries, the records of 1518 remained buried in dusty archives, too strange to believe, too unsettling to confront. Some claimed it was mass hysteria. Others said it was a curse, a poisoning, a punishment. Theories piled up: toxic mold, religious mania, psychological trauma, ergot fungus from spoiled bread. But none could fully explain what happened. Not really. How does one explain 400 people dancing against their will? How does one explain a force so powerful it moves through crowds like a virus, without touch, without sound, without form? How does one explain the compulsion to suffer, to bleed, to scream, to die, and to keep going anyway? Even today, no single cause has been proven. The mystery remains. But perhaps the most terrifying part of the dancing plague is this: it wasn't the only one. Similar outbreaks occurred in Germany, Switzerland, and Holland, some decades earlier, others centuries apart. All of them involved groups of people, suddenly and without warning, moving in ways they could not control, until death or deliverance. Something took hold of them, something no one could see, no one could stop. And if it happened then, it could happen again. Because deep in the human mind, there are still places we do not understand. And maybe, just maybe, something ancient waits there. Not a virus, not a demon, but something older than both. Something that does not want to be named.